Hello, welcome to Forest Focus. We are halfway through week one of the international break. Does that mean Ange Postecoglou is staying in charge? Should he? And are Nottingham Forest fans who want him out entitled? Joining me to discuss all that and more, first of all, is TNT Sports commentator and friend of the show, obviously now, Adam Summerton. Good morning.
I've got that status now, have I?
Yes.
Morning. Are you okay?
Yes, good. Thank you. Good to have you with us. And the iPaper's chief football writer and Forest fan, and obviously friend of the show, Daniel Storey. Good morning. How are you?
Thank you. Yeah, all good. Thought I was missing out on that bit, which would have been a wounding blow after Adam got it.
No, definitely not. Right, good to have you both with us. Lots to talk about. Probably around the same thing that we've been doing, but it's good to get different perspectives and on a few different things that have been said about Ange Postecoglou recently. Adam, kick us off. Just your general thoughts on where we're at, because you've been on here a lot and you've always been positive, and I feel like you're a positive person. So how are you feeling about where Forest are at right now?
Well, it's a difficult situation. There's no getting away from that. Maybe there's some big decisions to be made. We'll wait and see on that, whether how that all progresses. Obviously, it's all going to be driven primarily by results, and they haven't been good enough so far. There's no getting around that. There's no getting away from that. I think if I'm to say a big concern that I had, and maybe even a red flag, you could say, came very early on when Ange was appointed. I think it was directly after the Arsenal game where he did a press conference. And I think he was asked the question, how long will it be before we see your style of football? And he said, well, the next game, Wednesday, I think it was, in the League Cup against Swansea. And that immediately rang some alarm bells for me, because I felt the manager coming in after Nuno, I thought they had to show three qualities that were really important. That it was versatility, pragmatism, and man management, because of the situation they'd inherited, the fact that they'd succeeded a popular, successful manager, the fact that this was a group of players who would already, they were looking to change the style immediately, weren't they, under Nuno at the start of the season? They were that process had already started. Clearly, it would be accelerated even more under Postecoglou, and that just concerned me a bit, because I thought, I'm not so sure I would go that quick. I think it needed to be managed a little bit differently to that, in my opinion. And I don't know whether that's part of the problem that we're seeing right now. And I think in terms of how far this continues, whether it ends up being successful or not, a lot depends already. And it's amazing to be saying this so early on, is does Ange have the backing of the owner first and foremost, and the players? Are the players buying in? Because I think once you want to change something quite radically and quite quickly, you need that buy-in from the players, whether we like that or not. It's absolutely imperative, and I think that's going to become very clear in the coming weeks as to whether he has that or not. I remember when he was at Brisbane Roar, or reading an interview with one of his players. I think it was a guy called Matt Smith from Brisbane Roar. I was doing some research about Postecoglou ahead of a Spurs game, the first Spurs game he did. And I remember reading the quote from Matt Smith where he talked about, and this is to quote him, he said he brings players along on that journey and they buy into what he does. There's zero tolerance for players who don't want to follow, and we were never made to feel comfortable. His mantra is, we never stop. He backed you, he supported you, and he made you feel invincible. Well, those qualities for me, Matt, really need to come to the fore in terms of managing what is an incredibly difficult situation for him right now, that has the potential to get away from him very quickly. And it's really calling upon all his man management skills, I think, at the minute, to see if he can. And again, it seems crazy to say this so early on, but to turn this situation around.
Yeah, there's loads to unpack there. It's interesting. I mean, he's quite magnetic at Spurs and seemed to bring players with him. He looks kind of browbeaten to me now already, because he's had such a rough time of it. Perhaps we'll come back to that. I mean, Adam said there, Dan, backing of the manager, backing of the players. He obviously doesn't have the backing of a sizable percentage of the fan base now. It's interesting that the pundits and the main pundits and the conventional wisdom of pundits, so talking about, Jamie Carragher, Micah Richards, Wayne Rooney, I saw all say this is mad, you can't sack him. Chris Sutton on a tweet that Part 5 Live put out, saying that Forest fans are entitled and it's crazy to want Ange out. Obviously, Sutton's a big ally of Ange's from Celtic days with his affiliation there. What do you think about, I suppose, especially what Sutton says about our fans entitled? Are our fans, two of the words I've written down, a fear and anger? Are we just a bit worried about our club travelling? What do you think about, I suppose, entitled especially?
Yeah, I think there's two things with entitled. Firstly, you hear that word quite a lot, not just about Forest fans, but about lots of fans. And in the main, I think you take out the extreme 5% each way, and it leaves you with a bulk of, let's say, 90% of fans, I think, who just want the best for their club. They're just desperate for their club. One, to win as many games as they can, and two, to be an institution that they are proud of. And they're proud to tell people they support. They're proud to wear the shirt. They're proud to go to games. And I don't think wanting a situation that looks a little bit more sustainable, a little bit more like we've got control of the situation, is in any way entitled. This is not about we haven't won in 7 games to get him out. It's about a lack of belief in what's happening in general, I think, in terms of Nuno at the summer, in terms of the structure of the club, in terms of Nuno leaving / wanting to leave / being sacked, and the replacement in Postecoglou, which is one element of that. The other thing that is not unique to Forest, but is really, really, really pertinent here with Forest, is that ever since we got promoted, Evangelos Marinakis stood on the steps of Town Hall and said, of the council building, and said, this is just the start. We're going to go higher and higher. We then stayed up and he said, I want to go higher and higher. We then finished 7th last season and he said, I want to go higher and higher. And if you tell the fan base that your intention is to go higher and higher, even when you finished in your highest position for 30 years, then inevitably when you don't go higher, people are going to say, well, hang on a minute. You said we were going to go higher and higher. So you add expectations onto a fan base that is already, demanding and wants success, like every fan base does. If in the summer the club had said, we want to change the style, we accept there's probably going to be a bridge season where we finish lower middle half because we've got Europe and we're trying to change the way we play, and that might take a change of manager at some point, although they wouldn't have made that public then. Everybody, I think, would have pretty much been on board with that. No one was saying, I want to finish 5th this season, or I expect to finish 5th or 6th this season. They were saying, this is going to be hard. It's going to take some getting used to, but I think in the long run, we can be better for it. And if the club had said that, I don't think we would be in this situation in terms of wanting a manager, lots of people wanting a manager out after 7 games. But because they've said this has to be better, this has to keep getting bigger, inevitably, when it doesn't get bigger pretty quickly, people go, well, this is not what you told us to sign up for.
I think as well, you couple that with, to me, Adam, as well, the jarring fear and remembrance of where we were as a club for 20 years in the Championship. And that suddenly, this was the first season where it felt like it shouldn't have been a factor. And I think we're reminded that it's all quite fragile. And if you get things wrong, you can end up back there, especially this season, with teams are more competitive. The bottom 6 is the bottom 6 it was supposed to be, I would say, on paper, apart from Sunderland swap places with us, sadly. But it's competitive, and it suddenly feels like a big fear factor of what could go horribly wrong, I guess.
Yeah, I understand those fears, particularly for a fan base that, as you say, have been through some really difficult times. And then when you see the sunny uplands right in front of you, you can almost reach out and touch them, or you've had a bit of it already. And then suddenly there's the danger in the space of a few weeks that it gets snatched away. I guess it's not that too much of a surprise that you are going to get a fairly extreme reaction. And maybe we saw that a bit at the Midtjylland game. So I do understand, to a degree, fans' frustrations, particularly when you consider, they've gone from consistency and certainty in terms of what they expect to see on the pitch to the complete opposite, really. It's a bit chaotic at the moment. I think even, we saw in the last game, perhaps even Ange rowing back on his normal principles to play very differently, maybe just hoping he could come away from Newcastle with a point and something to build and grow upon, which maybe you could argue was actually, in the circumstances, quite sensible. I saw him play more pragmatically at times with Spurs last season in the Europa League. And we all know he can do it. I would say as well, though, that what Forest are going through, when you consider how accelerated their development was last season, I've said to you many times, I would estimate it at 2 to 3 years ahead of schedule, I would say, in terms of where Forest got to last season. it's actually quite normal that you would have a tricky period that would follow that. It's incredibly rare in any sport, particularly football, where you would see continuous accelerated growth, even when an owner is committing so much financially as Marinakis has done. There are going to be teething troubles, particularly when you change style. And I actually think that these teething troubles that have been seen now maybe have been heightened by the fact that you've got a very different type of manager who's come in. But I actually believe had Nuno stayed, that you would have seen teething troubles too, in terms of the. I think for Forest to continue the growth that Dan was talking about there, to go to becoming a club that eventually expects to finish or at least challenge for the European places season in, season out consistently, and perhaps be challenging for silverware season in, season out, which is where clearly Marinakis expects them to go. I think there always had to be, or it was going to happen, that there would be a change in the style, because as you sign better players, they are going to want to have more of the ball. I mean, I've taught to play. In fact, I was talking to Don Hutchison at the weekend about exactly that. And I was saying, what do you think? He said, well, yeah, because if you're going to get better players, they want to get on the ball more, and they want to try and control games more. They want to be on the front foot more. So it was inevitable that a club that last season, saw very little of the ball, was it the least in the Premier League in terms of the percentage? So that is quite a sizable change already. So there were probably going to be teething problems anyway. And what we've probably got here with Postecoglou is, in terms of the PR side of things, is that you've had a popular manager who achieved success, who achieved that accelerated progress, has gone. And he's gone in a situation where I think the fans are probably a bit confused as to, because we all need someone to blame when things go wrong, don't we? And anything in life, you almost feel like, well, that's why it went wrong. Well, I think the Forest fans don't really know who to blame for this. Is it the owner's fault? Is it, a lot of the discourse among non-Forest fans is, what's Marinakis doing? This guy's crazy. How can you get rid of a manager that did that? But there's more nuance to it than that, I think. And so other fans will be saying, well, do we blame Nuno? Did Nuno not want to be there anymore? And did he want to leave the club? So it's very hard. And I can understand why the fans have, to an extent, have got quite angry, because you don't know who to blame. All your hopes seem to be being snatched away from you. It's a very confusing situation for the supporters right now. But I do think, fellas, that they will find their way out of it. And that this is a very, very good group of players. Maybe a squad that's a little bit top heavy, but it's still got a lot of quality and an exceptional spine to that team. And whether it's with Ange or not, I do believe that eventually they will find their way out of this, and they will be okay, and they will build towards where Marinakis wants them to go. But I also feel it was almost inevitable that a club that had accelerated so much in their growth would have a tricky period at some point, whoever was manager.
Just one more before we get into Ange and his future, Dan. I mean, just picking up on what Adam says, do you think the fears that we're in a right state are slightly overblown then? Because we are so early into the season, and I do feel we have a strong team and a strong squad. Is it more because, I was trying to think what Adam was talking about, a parallel club that have risen this quickly? And I can only really think of Leicester, well, never the most popular example, but, getting up, staying up, winning the league, and then eventually blowing up after, a couple of good years in an FA Cup. And we just kind of overly dramatizing is the right word, because it's so important to people. But is it slightly overblowing, the worries that we're in massive trouble or not?
I don't think so. I really don't. I'm less positive about this season than Adam. I'm less sure. To my mind, I absolutely agree with Adam that under Nuno there would have been an inevitable dip, and it would have been really interesting to see how the club dealt with a dip with Nuno in charge. Changing manager almost strikes me as, well, we're trying to get ahead of the game there. We think there'll be a dip under Nuno because it's, second full season and they've got Europe and there's a lot of change in progression of play, and we're not sure if Nuno's necessarily the right coach for that. So we're trying to get ahead of the game there. And that's a courageous move. And you kind of live and die by those courageous moves. But what has happened, to my mind, is that the floor has now been removed. I think if we'd have dipped under Nuno, I think there was a natural floor of around 14th or 15th. I don't think anyone can say with any certainty now that floor exists in any way anymore, because the last game we won was the opening day of the season. We've played 2 promoted clubs since then. We've gone out of the League Cup. We've taken 1 point from the 2 European games, including losing at home to a team from I think the 18th ranked league in Europe, Denmark, and they're not top of that league. So I think that there is a path where this can improve relatively quickly, with or without Ange. Either he makes it work, or we try and find somebody that will make it work. Although sacking 2 managers in the season is not historically a natural route to rebounding. But there is no floor anymore. I honestly believe that. Forest could finish 20th. They could finish 11th. I think under Nuno, there was, take out all the political stuff and the stuff with Edu, like wind back to end of May. And I think there is a natural floor to Forest that means we're not quite an established Premier League club, but we are, you know, we saw the odds, we saw the pundit suggestions where Forest would finish. It was about 12th and everybody knew we had Europe. So yeah, that's what worries me. And I think that's what promotes the fear amongst supporters, in that last season, everything seemed to be about control. And Forest were able, even without the ball, were able to kind of control their own narrative. We know how we're going to play. We know how we're going to be successful. We're backing ourselves to do it. And the players are executing it in defence and in attack. Now, it sort of feels like there's no control to the game. You know, Midtjylland was the one game, I think, where everyone went to and thought, whatever else happens, I'll back us to win this game, because the team from a weaker league, we've not been brilliant at defending so far. The football under Ange has been a bit piecemeal in terms of his style and then sitting off. We're not quite sure what to expect in everything else, but we think we'll beat Midtjylland. So when that third goal goes in and you're 3-1 down, everyone goes, oh God, I don't know what Forest are going to do anymore now between here and May. I don't know how many managers we're going to have. I don't know what style of play we're going to have. I don't know which teams are going to be able to beat. And that fear promotes outward angst, and that's exactly what happened.
Let's talk about Ange then, but just before we do, a quick word for the Trent Navigation. International break, as mentioned, England versus Wales on Thursday, 7:45 p.m. kickoff. You can watch it at the Big Shed, live on the big screens and inside the pub, so get your dinner there. You don't need to book or anything like that. Just head on down, and thanks to Nav, as ever, for their support. So, based on everything that you've said, Adam, based on everything that Dan said, do you feel that Ange is ultimately toast, whether it's before the Chelsea game or in the next few weeks, that it's not going to happen because of the fan reaction? Or do you think he can turn it around?
Well, I have to say that whenever I hear it said with any sort of regularity that, you know, a manager's next game, they have to win or they're going to go. And I always think, well, if it's got to that point, then, you know, to use what the word you use there, are they already toast? It's very hard, I think, to give a firm opinion, because I always like to try and be as balanced as I possibly can when I'm asked a question, particularly about somebody's job, their livelihood. And I think that we need to know, or it needs to become clear, whether he has the backing of the players, because what he asks of the players, as I illustrated with a little bit from Matt Smith when he was playing or he was managing in Australia, I think he's the type of guy that needs to take the players with him. It's absolutely imperative. Maybe I suppose you could say that's important with every manager, and it is, but I think the way that Ange likes to play, the way that he is off the camera as well, I think that's really imperative with him. And that's underlined even more when you take over mid-season with no pre-season and succeeding a guy who was clearly popular within the club, within the fan base, within the group of players. So a lot of this depends on, does he have the support of the players he's trying to lead? I'm not sure that we totally know the answer to that yet. And we don't know in terms of the owner as well. If he gets a result against Chelsea and things start to feel more positive, it's amazing in football how quickly things can run away from you in a negative sense. But I believe they can also turn around in a positive sense as well. What concerns me again is if I look at Ange's records just over the last 12 months or so in the Premier League with Tottenham and now with Forest, it doesn't inspire confidence. And the fans are seeing that. And I think part of the reason that the reaction to him has been so quick and so extreme is because he's not just being judged on the job that he's done so far at Nottingham Forest. He's being judged on the last 12 months and the PR side of things as well. People constantly comment on his demeanour in interviews, his demeanour with the press. And whilst and some people would say, what does that matter? That's irrelevant as long as the manager is, is right with the players behind the scenes, and that's all fine. It doesn't really matter how he speaks to the press. But how you speak to the press is essentially, when you're speaking to the press, you're speaking almost indirectly to the fans. They're the medium by which you communicate with your supporters. And I just have found some of his interviews a difficult watch. Saying things like, I'd watch this, but with mute on and things like that. He doesn't need to go down paths like that. He doesn't need to, push buttons and try and bite back. And I get it, because he's passionate and he is, whether people like to saying this or not, and they'll say the leagues that he won in, but he's a winner. He's won a lot. And he's been successful. He delivered silverware to Spurs after so long without. So he is a winner. He's right when he says that. He's got 30 years worth of coaching experience. This is a guy whose passion I actually like. I think that I like it when he says things like, things don't always have to be easy. Things can be a fight. I can relate to that myself. Things in life that are worth having aren't always easy. But at the same time, I think that he doesn't do himself any favors sometimes in the way that he communicates through the media. And I'm already seeing a bit of that, which so early on would be a concern. It feels like he's already as embattled as he was in the second season at Tottenham. And that's a concern so early on in his tenure at Forest.
Yeah, Adam references his record last season. In total, I think it's 30 defeats in 49 games. And as fans, I guess they see that headline figure, and I'm sure there's context behind it. We've discussed at length around injuries, but fans will see that, I guess. And then on the flip side, Dan, if I was to play devil's advocate before I ask you about his future, but again, reading up on him as Adam did, he has started slowly in jobs, multiple jobs, and ultimately got there when afforded time and patience. And by the end of his time at Spurs, it seemed like the players were very much with him and gutted that he left. So I suppose the same question, do you think he can turn it around with time and patience, or is that inevitably not going to be afforded to him now?
I don't think it will be afforded to him long term. I don't think that's particularly controversial to say. I think that, Adam's completely right. Like, the Spurs record is relevant. Football fans can watch as much football as they want from other leagues now, let alone inside the Premier League. And Forest have seen their own team beat a Postecoglou team, because that team struggled to break down a team, did lots of passing, had quite a lot of shots from range, ended up overloading to try and combat that issue, and then Forest hit them on the break. Now, I don't know the exact specifics of Midtjylland's third goal versus Forest's winner against Spurs at home last season at the City Ground at the same end, but they look pretty similar to me in that they got caught on the break. And football fans aren't stupid. They can see that. Unfortunately, a manager doesn't always get a clean slate when he goes in at a club. And part of that is about the job you select. And if you only have a few months off and you stay in the same league and you join a club where you are replacing a very popular and very successful manager, the most successful in 30 years, you have to know that you have to hit the ground running. And I think that has created too much pressure for him. I go back to what Adam said at the start about him saying in that first press conference post-game Arsenal, "You'll see it on Wednesday, mate." And I thought, yeah, we kind of did. He was right. Forest were brilliant first half and then collapsed and defensively weren't organised enough. And that's pretty much exactly what we've seen from then on in. And the worry for me is that maybe that is Postecoglou football at the moment. Maybe he does need a year off or a different league or just a kind of rediscover himself, because Adams, again, he's right. He looks like late era Spurs in that press conference, even the one after Betis, when I was there, you were there, Matt, and the questions were all very positive about how Forest had played. It was a good result. They were unfortunate not to win the game. They were really creative. They dominated with the ball first half. That he was teed up to give great answers, and he gave positive answers, but he did so with a demeanor that suggested he was knackered, basically. And it's a huge amount of pressure managing a Premier League football club. It's even more pressure when you follow a successful manager. And I would add, it's even more pressure when you are appointed by a guy like Marinakis, who is so nakedly ambitious and is so quick to tell people this is where we're going to go, whether anyone else likes it or not. Because two things happen. Firstly, you create pressure for your manager and your players. And secondly, you create a mentality amongst other clubs of, well, we're going to show them. Like, you know, it's the meme of we always win, isn't it? Like it creates a pressure which people want to beat Forest. People are now finding this situation sadly quite funny. And that's what we need to work through. And I think that's going to be really, really hard.
So I suppose the question is that I've asked everyone is who next in that sense, and I suppose the other question is about the position that they would take in terms of pressure. But in terms of who next, Adam, you cover a lot of European football, so you're perhaps better placed to comment on a couple of the names that are out there. I mean, there's Terzic, Marco Rosa, Thiago Motta was one that might be slightly interesting to me, but who sounds like he might have a similar style of play. Do you see a manager out there who is a good appointment that isn't? I mean, Sean Dyche and Rafa Benitez, and even Graham Potter was mentioned. I saw on an article on Team Talk. I feels like sort of frying pan fire with a couple of those, at least two of them there to me. Maybe not Dyche, but that's a big departure. So any names that appeal to you?
Matt, the difficulty with answering this question at the moment is that the situation Forest find themselves in, it's one thing taking a manager pre-season, and it's a very different one to take a manager, particularly when it's the second already early on into a season. I think it requires perhaps a different profile to which you would look for if there was a firm plan in place and you were saying, we're going to appoint this guy, we're going to give him a full pre-season. Now, if you were asking me with a full pre-season, I'll be looking at one of the brightest coaches, in my opinion, in European football right now, which is Sebastian Hoeneß at Stuttgart. I'm not saying that he would have been an absolute perfect fit, but if you're looking at qualities and somebody who could help eventually take the club to the level that they want to be at, I think he's somebody that I would definitely be looking at. Would I look to try and take him at this stage in a season with the problems that there are? I'm not so sure. I think it's probably going to require somebody who's got the ability to organise, make players feel good about themselves pretty quickly, stabilise things, a man manager perhaps above anything else right now. So sometimes you have to find a manager who's maybe right for the circumstance, which is ironic really, because that was, Forest had Cooper, who was right for where they were in that stage of their evolution. Nuno was the right guy, as it turned out, for that stage of the evolution. And then it was who was right for the next stage. And I actually understood why they would move away from Nuno. Now, I know some people will look at that and say that's crazy, but I actually understood that. And I understood why for Nuno, for him, it might even have been the right thing for him to move away from Forest as they were, because of the skill set required and the boxes that needed to be ticked by the next manager to take Forest on with, as Dan has said, an extremely ambitious owner who's going to have big demands and he wants you in Europe every year. He wants you challenging clearly for the European places every year. He's probably going to want to put pots on the table as well. You're going to need to be able to manage up really well. All these things, you're going to have to be more on the front foot. You're going to have to play a style of play where you're going to have more of the ball. You're going to have to manage a bigger squad in terms of quality. That's going to require man management skills in terms of ego. All these different things. I understood the departure from Nuno in that respect, because I didn't think necessarily he was going to be the right guy to take them forward. But now, because of the position they've got themselves in mid-season, it might almost be that they need a stopgap manager. Now, that to the fans might not sound very palatable. They might think, no, we want to go to the next guy who's going to take us forward. But with the fans and you guys who watch them, more regularly than I do, already concerned about relegation, that now has got to be, I suppose. I don't personally feel that will be where Forest season goes. But you guys watch them more closely than I do, and you seem to be concerned about that. So what you probably do need is a stabilizer. And people will say, well, we don't want that, but maybe it's horses for courses. I mean, one name that people again will probably laugh at, but he's on the Marinakis payroll and he's gone into his last two jobs mid-season and ended up delivering a European trophy in both of them, is Mendilibar at Olympiacos. Now, that might, as I say, that might sound pretty crazy, but he's got a proven track record of doing exactly what Forest needs, which is somebody to come in, stabilise, build, and then ultimately have success. So whether that could be a move that could happen with him already being on the payroll, I've no idea. But if you're asking me to chuck names in there, That's somebody who's worked with Marinakis, knows his ways, has worked with him successfully for a couple of years, and went in at Sevilla and did an incredible job, has gone in at Olympiacos and done superb work as well. So, you know, I think a lot of the fans seem to want Silva, don't they? But you know, if they can get him out of Fulham, perhaps that could be an option. When you look at, he would tick several boxes, and he's clearly got a lot of Premier League experience. But it's a difficult one, Matt. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I've got all the answers. But if I throw a wild card in there, somebody who I've admired for a long, long time, Spalletti, who would be somebody I really love. I mean, the football he played at Napoli when they won the title there was some of the best football I've ever seen in Italy. But he would be a real wild card. I mean, somebody who, you know, he managed up reasonably well to begin with De Laurentiis at Napoli, but that all ended in tears in the end. His last job at Italy ended in tears, so that wouldn't come without its risks. But I think stylistically, he could tick some boxes.
I don't know if wildcard's the kind of word I want to hear right now.
Exactly.
But I'm sure he's very good. From listening to Adam there, Dan, I mean, on the one hand, Sean Dyche, stopgap, make players feel good about themselves, probably do what you need. Balancing that with Marinakis, ambition, wants to play a certain way. Maybe fans might be more keen on a Dyche appointment than the owner is. I don't know. What next for you? If we're assuming Ange goes in the next 5-6 games, or who would tick the boxes for you?
Yeah, I mean, like Adam, I'm going to struggle to be able to give this with any certainty. I mean, the general theme of this show, from my perspective, is kind of I don't know, and I'm holding my hands up and saying all we're doing here is talking about slight hypotheticals because we're in a situation where we don't know. We have lost that control. I think we'll find out two things. Firstly, we'll find out Forest's ability to get a manager from another club, because I think it's fair to say that the in manager, I mean, it's a very obvious thing to say, but the managers who are in work look far more attractive to me than the managers who are out of work at the moment. That's not always the case. Sometimes in a summer, you get a crop of managers who have left clubs. You know, next summer, for example, Silva, Iraola and Glasner are all out of contract. So that looks the out of work manager market at that point looks much more attractive, because you don't have to pay payoff fees or compensation fees, and you might be able to attract one of them. We're about to find out whether we can do that in mid-season, because I think that would be the preference. In terms of, if we can't do that, then we're about to find out where Forest sit not in what we think about Forest or what Marinakis thinks about Forest, but where the game, in inverted commas, sees Forest right now and sees them as a managerial prospect. Because you go through those names and there is a long list of managers who have Premier League experience out of work, you know, from Gareth Southgate to Bruno Lage and dozens in between. If we are forced to go down that route where we want some experience and we want the manager needs to be out of work, yeah, we're about to find out where we sit, because they will be in the year. I would say without doubt at the moment that they are at least looking at things, because Forest have always done that. You know, they appointed Ange within hours of Nuno going. They've always had the manager seemingly lined up. So I think it's fair to say they are already working out their options there. And I suspect that conversation will start by trying to get into the ears of managers or agents who are currently employed. I hope they're currently employed by Premier League clubs, because Adam's absolutely right. Marco Silva is the name that everybody talks about, because he sits at that level where he feels gettable. He's worked for Marinakis before. He's out of contract next summer, but he's also not Iraola or Glasner, who seem like they're going to go on to stratospheric levels if they want to. And I don't think we're there yet. We pay pretty well. I still think we are attractive as a club, but we have to get this gap sorted between this expectation gap sorted, whereby managers don't feel immediate pressure that they have to hit the ground running, because that isn't hugely helpful, I don't think. Which leaves me with absolutely no idea where we are, because I don't see them going down the Dyche route. And I might be completely wrong here, but that seems to me like an admission of a step back a year and a half or 2 years, because that was your post-Cooper appointment, right? That was, do we need to stay in the league? We need to the only thing that matters here is us finishing 15th or 16th or 17th and then moving on. I don't think Marinakis sees that situation as so severe yet this early season. Maybe in 6 games, if Forest have drawn one and lost 5 the next 6, and they are firmly in the relegation mix, then that firefighter option becomes a lot more obvious, I think, and harder to avoid for even the decision makers. But right now, I think he'll continue to be ambitious, and he'll back himself to get a manager that he would have wanted after Ange, even if Ange had been successful. So that's a really complicated situation, because my worry is that quite a lot of them say, yeah, we've just seen what Ange has kind of been unable to do in 6 weeks, and my client doesn't really fancy his chances of denting his reputation by the same thing happening, and nobody wants a relegation on their CV. So it's a massive appointment, and I can't remember. I mean, in my lifetime, Forest have appointed God knows how many managers, and I can't remember being less certain about what type of manager they would go for next than I am right now.
I think that's really understandable that you as a fan would feel like that, though, because when we're assessing who's right for a particular job, we're in our heads, we've almost got like a checklist in our heads, haven't we, of what's required. And this is the difficulty with where Nottingham Forest are in their evolution, is that this is a club that has got ambitions and has spent money to back up that ambition, to want to, as I've said earlier, challenge for the European places every year, win silverware. So there's those expectations. Yet because of the change of manager so early on in the season, and the fact that has started so badly, you put yourself in a situation where you're thinking, hang on a minute, we could get relegated here. Or, so it's so difficult to say, well, who's the right fit then? Because is it the right fit for the ambition of a club challenging for Europe every year? Or is it, as you described it there, a firefighter? It's a really, really difficult managerial pick, this next one, if Postecoglou goes, because obviously the preferable scenario, and we can't lose sight of that, is that it works under him. And there's all hope isn't quite lost there. I know it depends on your point of view and your perspective as to whether, he's a dead man walking or whether he still could turn it around. But it's an incredibly difficult decision that Marinakis ultimately is going to have, particularly if, let's just say, they were to lose to Chelsea and maybe go another couple of games. It is going to get to there will be a tipping point. That's inevitable. The other thing to say, Matt, as well, is that as whoever gets this squad will look at it and go, if you just take the last sort of 6 or 7 games away and just look at that squad and go, they're going to look at it and go, oh, I've got some good players here, by the way. Let's not lose sight of that. This is a bloody good squad. And it's not that long ago that they were achieving exceptional things. It's a shame Einer's injured. I think that hurts the balance of the team down that right-hand side quite a lot. But Milenkovic and Murillo were one of the best centre-back partnerships in the league last season. Williams was excellent. Sells was one of the best goalkeepers in the league. Anderson, for me, is a £100 million footballer in development. Gibbs White's not played well this season, but he did last season, and he's in the England squad. You've got a luxury of wide players. You've got a lad who's just gone to the Brazil squad who can play up front for you. You've got Wood, who was incredible last season. There's others I could mention as well. This is not a bad group of players, and this, I think, is really important. That's why I have quite a lot of hope that it will turn around. There is a lot of quality there, and people will throw the phrase at me, too good to go down, and all that. It's not a phrase that I've used, but I do look at that group of players and just think, if somebody can get hold of it, stabilize it, calm everybody down, that's absolutely imperative. Look, to give you an example. Last season, I watched Roma in Italy were an absolute shambles in the first half of last season, an absolute shambles. And it was chaos. They were going through managers, terrible trouble behind the scenes. And they had a real unifying figure came in Ranieri, and it all changed. And they've actually continued that momentum now with him going upstairs and Gasparini coming in. So I've seen it in the recent past where a manager can come in, can unify, stabilize, organize with a good group of players, and it then can get back on an even keel. So it can happen, but clearly that next appointment is, if there is to be a next appointment, is huge.
Did you want to come in before, Dan?
I was just going to say, yeah, that you talk about the good squad, and it's a really good point to make, because it is. And actually, my great frustration of the Ange era, if it is even an era yet after 7 games, is not that the results have not been great, not that they have been unfortunate in at least 2, probably 3 of the games. It's that it does seem like that squad, with the quality it has, is almost starting with a blank canvas again. It's almost like what we were good at last season doesn't seem to really apply anymore, that's a problem of the appointment, I think, because they are so different as managers, that what's happened is we've sort of thrown the baby out of the bathwater from last season. So the defensive resilience at set pieces, the organisation between Milenkovic and Maria. I know Maria's been in and out with injury, but I think it still applies. The ability to get Gibbs White on the ball in central areas where he's not being double marked, the ability to get wingers running into space rather than just receiving the ball at feet and having to do something spectacular to beat a man. Like, it seems like we've lost most of the good bits of last season. I think that's where the frustration really is being sourced from.
That was why I said earlier, Matt, about how it was a real red flag for me, that interview after the Arsenal game where he was like, "Yeah, we're going to go and play my stuff," because I just thought, no, don't go too much too soon. These players feel good about themselves from last season. These players had certainty and consistency. Yeah, by all means, eventually develop this side to play how in your mold. But I always think the best managers for me, they have that ability to adapt. They have that versatility. They have that pragmatism. And from what I'd seen of Ange particularly in that Europa League run, I thought he can be that. He can be versatile. He can be pragmatic. But I was so concerned when I heard that interview. I thought, no, it's too much change too quickly will disrupt things. And I fear maybe that is what we've seen a bit of. And even things that, to go back to, again, what they were so good at last season, one of the major changes and improvements last season with Forest was how well they defended set pieces. And now suddenly they're looking really vulnerable on set pieces. And you're starting to think that, again, these are players who are losing confidence in themselves. So I think that's a really, really good point that Daniel makes there, and feeds into the concerns that you would have as to whether this can be a success going forward.
Tomorrow's podcast, well teed up, Adam, is with James Belshaw, who's going to go through the goals. He's already gone through the goals that we've conceded, and I got a very depressing message about them. But we're going to go through some of them for themes and see if they're retrievable or not. So check that one out. What's going on behind you, Dan? There's some ghostly door movements.
There's a cat is crashing the podcast, unfortunately. A cat that is strong enough to open a door now and is able to open a door, which is annoying.
One more for you, Dan, before we talk a little bit more about the squad for the last 5-10 minutes or so. This probably shows up how conflicted I am about it all, because while you were talking about no obvious managerial solutions, I was thinking, well, the obvious preference is that Ange has a couple more games to make it work. You get a result against Chelsea, and that's one against the head where you're not expected to win, and that can change perceptions. Obviously, the flip side of that is you lose to Chelsea and you lose to Porto, and it's absolutely toxic in the City ground. It feels even worse. But then Adam's saying about a unifying figure coming in Ranieri, and Postecoglou is not that because of as much as fan perception, but because of who he is. So is there an argument just to give him a couple more games and just hope more than anything? I think Kelvin used that answer on Monday, hope.
Yeah, and the kind of twee answer here is that sensible football clubs, like football club management, has a large area of luck which you cannot control. It has a large area of talent which is sort of outside your control because the club buy the players and you inherit a group of players. And in the middle is this magic area where you control your own controllables, and hope isn't one of those controllables. So you have to kind of we said it about next game being must win, but if you're already relying on hope, then that's like the antidote to your management, right? You have to eliminate all that. Ange has to say, I'm going to do it the right way. I'm going to get it better organized on the training ground. I'm going to spend 2 weeks, if I get it, coming up with better defensive set piece plans, coming up with better quick use of possession in midfield so that the fullbacks aren't having to push quite so high and getting caught on the break, coming up with solutions for not just having lots of passes in the final third and touches outside the box that don't just end with a shot from outside the box. All of that sits far away from hope. The moment I hear a manager say, hopefully we'll be better, I think, well, you're done, because you're already admitting it's sitting outside your control. The unifying figure thing is really interesting, because it's something that Forest have been far too guilty of in the past, because you add in club legend name X or Y, whether it's Stuart Pearce or Martin O'Neill or whoever, and you say, well, this guy gets the club and we'll work out the situation. Actually, we want the opposite, don't we? We want someone who has no emotional baggage, which I think Ange does from last season. We want someone who is relatively pragmatic, but also sees the situation. Pragmatism doesn't equal defensive football. Pragmatism just means getting the best out of a group of players. And I think we've got a really good set of attacking players. And it's someone who is able to shut out the noise and say, just ignore all that. We're 8-10 games into a new season. We've got 28 left. We can still get 84 points in those, and we're going to try and get 60 of them. That's what we need. But it's so hard to do that mid-season. It really is. You have to get a bit lucky, I think. You have to land on the guy. You'll know better than me, Adam, but when Ranieri came into Roma, I kind of vaguely remember people going, what, Ranieri back in football? That seems weird. And then four weeks later, everyone goes, well, obviously this was the perfect solution. But it's not, it only feels like that in hindsight, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think Roma were really forced into it in a way, because they'd had those, Juric had come in and it had been a disaster. And I think that they just thought, well, who is a safe pair of hands? Who's going to get everybody? And he's one of the greatest sporting Romans in history. We are talking about a serious guy here who's also had a very successful career. So I know that people will say, well, there isn't a Forest Ranieri out there. I get that. But I do feel that when you have, because what I would say about Roma as well is what I've said about Forest, is that I looked at Roma and I thought, this team is playing so far below what it's capable of, that if somebody comes in and just calms everyone down and says, just chill, relax, let's just do what we're good at, then I feel that can happen at Forest as well. That somebody can come in and just calm everybody down, the right type of character, and look at that squad and go, well, this is a squad that's already proved that it can be successful at this level. This is a group of players like those Roma players who'd shown that they're good footballers. So I do feel that can happen at Forest as well. But again, I say that I should be able to sit here and say, that's the guy that you need to go and get. And that's the difficulty at the minute, is that there's not necessarily that name is the.
I can't believe I'm coming round to saying this, but like the closest thing to that is Dyche. He has some history with Forest. He is the kind of pragmatist in that, took Burnley to 7th or whatever, and will come in and go, right, get rid of all the nonsense. He lives locally. Seems to be in La Storia in West Bridgford every other week. He's had some time out the game. Like, I cannot believe I'm saying that, because I thought those days were over, but maybe they're not over anymore. I don't know.
Just 2 points on that then. I mean, the name I think is Silva, because you need a name that fans are going to get behind, because you can't be 6 games into the next manager and saying sacked in the morning, because you're absolutely doomed then. There's no way back in the whole season, I think, if we're changing managers again. So it's got to be someone that fans are going to rally behind.
Yeah.
And it feels like Silva's the one. Dyche, I think fans would give more time to than Ange, but if it goes wrong and we're playing shitty football, then I think people will be thoroughly fed up by Christmas. And the other thing is, I'm getting ahead here, but the end of the season, if we finish 17th or something, which I'd probably take now, are we in a position where half the squad think, oh, actually, out comes the end. This project isn't working. I quite fancy a move. And a lot of your good players want out then. You will react to that, Dan, straight away.
Yeah, I mean, I think over the last 2 years, that has played on our minds because we've wanted to grow. I think there's 2 things to say. Firstly, I think the priority now is on pitch. And look, if my biggest worry about Forest in the next 10 months is which of our best players get targeted by big clubs next summer, then we've probably done all right from here on in, because there's a potential here for reputations to get dented a little bit, particularly in the defensive group. Maria and Milenkovic. I think Anderson will rise above whatever. He's too good a player at the moment. Gibbs White's already being tainted by the fact we're not as good, and we're slightly struggling how to work out how to play in possession. Hudson-Odoi, I think the same applies to him. He's been on the bench for a couple of games. There's lots of new wingers. He's not really hit things this season. So that is definitely a consideration for next summer. But we've kind of proven that, look, what we were attempting to do last summer, or the summer just gone, is what Brighton are really good at doing, which is that you have someone so that if your best player leaves, there's always already someone to step into their place. And that's what we were trying to do. That's why we signed James McAtee for Morgan Gibbs-White. That's why we signed Igor Jesus for Chris Wood. We were trying to do that already. Probably the same is true of Bakker or Hutchinson with Hudson-Odoi, although Elanga was being replaced. We've been trying to do that. It's just that stuff looks a lot better when you're 8th in the league, not 18th in the league, which is a really obvious thing to say, but it does, because those players are then coming on to complement and supplement the players ahead of them. We're not rotating a team in search of an answer that we haven't found yet. So it's like the short answer to what you're asking is I'm not that worried about it now, but that's only because it's naturally gone down my list of priorities and been overtaken by more serious things on the agenda.
I think what you're looking for, Matt, in the situation, the slightly unusual situation that Forest have found themselves in, is you're looking, in the absence of a true stick-on, he's the guy, you're looking for that, who gets closest to that sweet spot, who ticks the boxes for what Forest need now and what Forest needs if they're to go on the path or continue on the path that Marinakis has planned out for them. And if you're looking for somebody who falls within that sweet spot, then I do understand why Silva does tick quite a lot of boxes. And I do understand why the fans would want him. I also look at the existing relationship there is between him and Marinakis, which when a club is going through troubled waters and a difficult time, an existing successful or previous relationship between the owner and the manager, I think is something that you would have to put a fair degree of credence in. And the other thing I would say about Silva is if Postecoglou does go, and I feel the need to be respectful of him and say that there isn't a vacancy at the minute, he's in the job. But if he were to go, and I wouldn't think twice about this compensation thing. If you think he's the right guy, is it 8 million, 10 million quid?
Yeah,
look, if you're willing to spend 35 million on a player who doesn't even make the Europa League squad, or didn't initially, then 10 million for a manager who could completely change your club's fortunes is just a no-brainer for me. So if they think he's the man, then they should just go and get him if they can get him out of Fulham. And Fulham might resist it, and they might say, no, we're keeping our guy, and they'd have every right to do that.
The issue that Forest have in these negotiations is if I'm the client of any of these managers, I say, well, hang on a minute, you appointed a manager 6 weeks ago. So you clearly, I mean, we don't know. Maybe they did approach some of the names we've talked about already, but it sounds like Andrew's pretty high up on the list, given that he was appointed within hours of Nuno leaving. So if I'm any of those managers or their agents, I would be like, well, hang on a minute. Yeah, we should have been having this chat 2 months ago if you love me that much. So that is a hard thing to negotiate now. We are the club who will have had 3 managers in one season and potentially even 3 managers in 3 months, if it goes as badly as it might. So that becomes a kind of cross to bear for your club and can hold you back a little bit, I think.
Just one more pro Silva point, although it's a negative actually. Obviously, he's out of contract in the summer. They've not started the season well. They've only got 8 points themselves, and there's a little bit of fan sentiment thinking he's taken them as far as he can, and maybe he feels he has, and it's actually a good time to move. And maybe Fulham feel that as well. If they can get 10 million quid and things are going a little bit south, then maybe that plays into things. Or you wait another couple of weeks.
They're basically the opposite club to Forest ever since we got promoted together, right? Because they've been almost instantly just became a mid-table Premier League club almost overnight and have stayed there. Forest have kind of yo-yoed up and down the Premier League. And Forest have bought a huge number of players, I think something like 50 or 51 since we've come up. And I would be surprised if Fulham's is half that. They are a very stable club, but they're not one that is investing. Shad Khan is not investing a huge amount in the playing staff. I know they signed Kevin for 40 million late in the window, but even that felt like fans are getting a bit jumpy here about ticket prices. We need to invest in a marquee signing rather than necessarily being the guy, or the position that Silva wanted. So they are opposite to us. That doesn't mean it wouldn't work at all. It doesn't mean that he wouldn't want it or would want it, but I'm just saying that there are reasons why they have started this season slowly, I think.
Just before we wrap things up, word of thanks for Vesta Blinds. If you're looking for new made-to-measure blinds or shutters and you live in the East Midlands, do check out the link in the description, vestablinds.com. Number is on the screen as well. And thanks very much for their support as ever. I was going to do a whole bit on the international break, but we've done 55 minutes, so we should probably start to wrap things up. Adam, any final thoughts? Or if you want to come out on the international break and who benefits and who doesn't potentially, feel free. But any final thoughts on everything we discussed before we go?
Well, clearly, I mean, if we're presuming there's not going to be any news during this international break, then I'm fascinated to see how they do against what is a very good Chelsea side. Obviously, the reaction at the City ground is going to be interesting too. It is at home, isn't it? Is it
yes,
the Chelsea?
Yeah, on a certain network. Yeah.
Yes. So I guess from an outsider's point of view, not being a Forest fan, it's a fascinating thing to be watching at the minute. I've got to say, it's so opera-like. So it's very interesting to see how it will all pan out. And I don't really know at the minute. I've got to say, it's hard to predict how it will all move forward. But I do believe in the strength of the squad, and maybe it's blind faith in that group of players. I don't know, but I do think that they will find their way out of it ultimately. But it's undeniable that it's a very, very tricky situation. And so much of it is down to what happened over the summer or what didn't happen over the summer in terms of, it was so early on in the campaign where this parting of the ways with Nuno happened. That changed everything really in terms potentially this season. But yeah, I believe in that group of players that they will find their way, be it under Ange or not. I stand to have egg on my face. I get that, but
I hope you don't. I hope you don't. Forest v Chelsea is at 12:30, and it is on TNT Sports, so you can watch it there. Yeah, I mean, we've played 7 Premier League games. We've got 31 to go, and we've got a good squad. It just sounds so mad. 7 Premier League games, 2 weeks since I panned the camera to you down in Betis, and we just scored a second goal. We were like, "Shit, is it what's happening?" And then what's happening has become what's happening in a very, very different sense. So it's crazy. It can turn.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like final thought, that's it really. Like Forest just seem to live in their own sort of double speed world where everything goes from like lurches so quickly. And I know kind of everybody feels that their club is slightly ill-fated towards that, but my God, it feels appropriate at the moment. I just want 2 or 3 boring months, please, where we win a game and I feel like we're going to kick on and we draw at home or lose away. And I think, that's a shame. Just give me boring months. Give me just we honestly haven't had one of those since Chris. We've barely had a boring month since Chris Sutton left the club, have we? Which is just insane, really.
What are your next 2 games? Chelsea and then Porto, isn't it?
And then Man United, isn't it? No, Bournemouth away and then Man United.
Bournemouth. We always do well against Bournemouth, I think.
No, we
Bournemouth,
don't.
Man U, and then Leeds. I mean, just to finish, until last week, until I heard that 3rd goal going against Midtjylland, my stance was always you've got to give him till Leeds because you get Man U and Leeds, and surely if he's going to win any games, realistically, he's going to get points there. But man, it's going to be so toxic if Chelsea goes wrong, if he's still in charge. That's the worry. Like it just spirals. The fan reaction was so shocking. Genuinely, I'm really shocked this is happening. Not like I'm angry at the fans, just couldn't believe it was happening so quick. And then you just think, God. I suppose the one thing, we've done an hour, but the one thing is, was that all aimed at Ange, or was it a combination of what is happening to the club so quickly that we just don't quite know? So another game, maybe it's not that, maybe it's pent up emotion of all that excitement of Europe and people join in with the chants and don't necessarily aim it entirely at Ange, but the sentiment online is bleak. So Yeah, we've done an hour. We could have done another hour, and we'll pick this up on Friday with a listener Q&A. As mentioned, tomorrow with James Belshaw, and Belly will talk us through all the goals. Adam Summerton, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a pleasure. It's weirdly, I mean, there's part of me dreads doing these at the moment, but it's
you
always
guys, this must almost be like therapy right now. Just
well, it is for me.
come and unload.
It is for me. Daniel Storey. Anything you want to plug? Either of you? Anything you want to plug of what you've got coming up? Starting with Dan.
No, I'm off on holiday for a week in the international break. I'm going to the Isles of Scilly to play in the world's smallest football league, so that'll be fun.
What do you mean the world's smallest football league?
Well, so on St Mary's in the Isles of Scilly, they have the world's smallest football league, which is just 2 teams that play each other on repeat all season.
Oh, brilliant.
So I'm going to be making my long-awaited 11-a-side return on Sunday in that game.
Brilliant.
Oh man! So who signed you outside the transfer window? Which team are you playing?
I don't know yet. It's either the Garrison Gunners or the Woolpack Wanderers, I think. So one of those two.
Are you like a draft system, or?
Yeah,
I think I'm the most obvious 40-year-old ringer in the world.
Oh well, that will make a nice feature, though. To be fair,
Lovely.
Yeah, do check that out. Adam, what's your next game?
My next game is Estonia against Italy in the World Cup qualifiers. We're doing both of Italy's games. And intriguingly, I'm doing TNT Sports' first live FA Cup game of the season, which is, as they have to be called now, Robbie Savage's Forest Green away at Worthing, which is, I think, could be a really interesting night, actually. We're going to have the first round draw as well. That's on the Monday night. So, yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to doing that. I think it could be really good fun. So, Worthing, for anyone who doesn't know, they're a fantastic story. I won't go into all the detail now, but their owner and the way that he bought the club, and they're a really interesting story. I've been in the National League South playoffs 3 seasons in a row without actually managing to get up. But and Robbie Savage's Forest Green are second in the National League. They've just lost their first game of the season, so they've had a really good start. So, yeah, it should be good.
He's doing well.
Yeah, Savage is doing well. To be fair. Is their owner someone who's
I'm
really
happy
young?
to rule him out.
Rule him out of the Forest jobs. God, former Derby County midfielder. Yeah, Worthing's owner. Did he have a near-death experience or something mad and bought?
Yeah, well, he was a promising young player, and actually on the club's books, and was very sadly in a terrible car accident where he ended up losing all feeling from sort of his torso down, and obviously couldn't walk, and all his football dreams evaporated. And I think he had a difficult year or so, and his mum was saying he was just at home playing on his Xbox basically, and just had no hope for the future. And then he'd got presumably a big chunk of compensation money from the accident, and basically, in short, used it to buy Worthing. And from then on, it's been an incredible journey, and promotions and near promotions to the National League, developments to the stands. The fans absolutely adore him. I actually watched the TNT did a documentary about it a year or so ago, and I watched it last night with my daughter. It was brilliant, really, really, really good. What really feel good story, you know. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hopefully meeting him as well at the ground. So it's a good mixture of clubs. It's a night. I always love the FA Cup 4th qualifying round, the first round, second round, because the stories that you get, you know, they're the best part of it for a commentator. You get under the skin of the stories, and you can tell people the stories, and that's one of my favourite parts about covering the FA Cup. Certainly the early rounds, and this has got loads of that. So yeah, be good.
Brilliant. Very good. Two good, interesting notes to end on. Yeah, I want to see Dan Storey playing the FA Cup 4th qualifying round next season.
No, you do not.
Right. Thanks very much, everyone. If you've enjoyed this, do us a favour, hit like, hit subscribe, do consider membership or Patreon. You get early access to all podcasts like this that are pre-recorded, or a lovely 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. And if you remember, you can join us on Discord as well. And we have good chats about all this on there. Right. Thanks to Adam. Thanks to Dan. Thanks for your company today. Hit like if you haven't already. And if we don't see you tomorrow, we shall see you soon.